First of all, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
It's really cool. It's
Thank you.
an unbelievable show.
Thank you.
And I want first of all, how did you get involved in this way back when?
So I saw this production, Maria Friedman's production of Merrily in London in, I want to say, 2013.
Yeah.
And I saw it then and I loved it. It was the first time I'd seen any production of Merrily, or I think even Merrily wasn't one of the scores that I had heard as much growing up, so I didn't know it as well. And I found the whole thing just thrilling and amazing. But I didn't, and I will say that a part of me, when I watched Franklin Shepherd, went, God, I would love to have a go at that one day. I really that seems like a song that I would be in my wheelhouse.
Why did you think that?
Because for as long as I can remember, have been weirdly obsessed. My reaction to hearing a fast, lyrically complicated song has always been, I want to try and learn that. Yeah. I was obsessed with Tom Lehrer growing up, and so I memorized like a lot of that stuff, which was all training really for Franklin Shepherd. And so I watched it then, loved it, and then when they had sent me the script and said, would you be interested in this? And I met Maria and had a fantastic meeting with her, and it was immediately something that I wanted to do and be a part of. From there, as she went to build out the cast of Jonathan and Lindsay, it became more and more just, I was just so excited and thrilled at the way it all, but I could never have dreamed that it would go as well as it has gone, I don't think. But it's been extraordinary.
Yeah, the three of you have a real relationship, it seems.
Most of the reason that I'm any good in the show is because I'm next to Jonathan and Lindsay and I get to act with them, and I don't have to work to feel any of the things my character's supposed to feel. I've never really, I haven't had that often as an actor before. It makes it very, very easy. We've lived kind of alongside each other now over the past couple of years. I've had a kid, Lindsay has got married, she's having another baby. Jonathan's seen Beyonce 4 times. It's been a huge time for all of us. He makes that joke himself, so I'm not just being flippant.
But you were even the ring bearer at Lindsay's wedding.
Yeah, which came out of purely that we were standing in Lindsay's dressing room the day before her wedding day, and because in the show, I'm the ring bearer at Jonathan and Katie's wedding. Yeah. And so Lindsay just threw out like, hey, would you be the ring bearer at mine? And I was like entertained by that idea. And then when I got to the wedding, I was like, oh, I've gone from just being able to relax and be a guest to having some responsibility, and I hated that. But I was very honored to be asked.
I would imagine that kind of growing up in film, theater is quite different.
It is, but I think I had always, I think I'm very lucky to have gone from film to stage in the way that I have. I don't, and maybe this is something I think I've probably worked on as I've done more stage, but I don't see a huge, or I don't think of the types of acting that I'm doing on stage and on film as really being any different. I think you sort of think of, you know, you naturally fill a bigger space, a bit bigger, but I don't think of having to do anything really differently in terms of my process from one to the other. But I was aware, particularly starting in London, I was very aware of there had been kind of like a spate of film actors doing stage, and a lot of people had very strong opinions about whether they were good at that or not, and sort of critique that was leveled, I think, against a few of them was that they just can't like project, or they can't do any of the stuff, particularly in London, like there's very little miking in straight plays. So I was like, okay, well, I want to try and not let people say that about me. So I started working with a voice coach kind of 18 months before I went into rehearsals for Equus, because I knew there would be stuff to develop and get better at. And then I think because I'd grown up around my parents, I've been raised, growing up around my parents sounds like a weird thing to say, because my parents raised me, and they are who they are.
But technically it's true.
Yeah, it is true. They had grown up doing a lot of theatre when they were actors, so I think I'd heard stories about what that was like, so it wasn't like a huge shock to the system in terms of the 8 shows a week or the differences in the sort of the day-to-day of the job.
Equus was a pretty bold choice to make at that point in your life and your career.
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, I think I knew that if I was going to do stage, I couldn't do something that was going to be, like, easy. Like, I knew that I would have to be doing something that was challenging enough that people couldn't say, well, yes, he's done stage, but it's not really, you know, he's not really pushing himself, he's not really doing... I felt like, and, you know, maybe no one would have said that and I could have just done something much easier, but I'm so glad I did it. I do feel like every time I've done any theatre or any production I've ever done, I've come away from it like a better actor.
You think you were trying to prove anything to yourself or to anybody else?
100%. There's a huge amount of confidence that comes from knowing, because film acting is wonderful and I love doing it and I love working on film, but you can get bailed out by an editor, your entire career. Editors make performances. I knew I wanted to continue acting, but I wasn't sure of what I was offering or how good I was or what I could do. There was something really a relief and reassuring and confidence building about learning that I could succeed just on a stage in front of an audience without the millions of people that can save you on a film set.
What made you want to be an actor?
I think I loved the process of making stuff immediately. From the first time I was on a set on David Copperfield or on Potter, or the first time I was in a rehearsal room, I've always loved being in this environment. It's the best job in the world. And I'm strange in that I'm less passionate about watching films and theatre. I mean, I love going to stuff, and the things I love, I am very passionate about. But I don't devour it in the same. I got into making stuff before I really had time to get passionate about watching stuff. Yeah. I think it was around the third Harry Potter film where I really started thinking, okay, I love this. I love being in this world. I want to make sure I can try and continue that for the rest of my life.
Yeah. What did you love about it?
I mean, I think certainly being on a film set or on stage, I think it's even more true of film because of the huge amounts of disciplines that go into making a film. You were just in the middle of hundreds of people all pushing together in a creative act, and that's an incredibly exciting thing to be in the middle of. I think there's community on sets and in theatre. Yeah, you're a part of a team, and I've always just loved that environment.
Yeah, you've talked in some interviews that I've read about how you and the rest of the cast, we're all very aware about being child actors and what was supposed to happen to child actors.
Yeah.
How did you process all of that?
I don't know. I mean, I think we all did pretty well. I think we just had so from day one or two after it was announced that we were playing the parts, and in interviews, the way we received a lot of the perception of ourselves as kids was actually through interviews like this, because you're not like this is nice. But you'd sit down. No. But you'd sit down. A better example is maybe towards the end of Potter, where I'd be sitting down with somebody and they'd be like, "So, how do you feel about the possibility that your career is just never going to be anything after this?" And you kind of go like, "Oh, right, yeah, I guess that is what people think." And from the word go as well, people would start asking about other child stars or other stuff, and so you get a sense of that pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, the track record typically isn't great.
That's the thing. I do see that, but I would very much not want my son to be an actor, and certainly not when he's young. Yeah. But I do think there's also Christian Bale and Jodie Foster, and the ones who go on to be successful as adults, you just forget they also did it when they were young. A lot of the time. I mean, I remember a conversation that me and Emma Rupert had really early on, where I would say, we said to each other, we must not let each other get big-headed, I think was the word we used at the time.
You think there was a danger of that at that point?
Well, I don't think so. I think it was just something that we were 10 or 11 and we were hearing that this is what happened to other people in this world. So we were we must keep an eye on ourselves. And I think I attribute a huge amount of that to the crew of the Potter, obviously to my parents first and foremost, but also the crew of the Potter films were really important in treating us all kind of as kids first and as actors second. Yeah.
What did you take from your parents in this sense? Because your mother was a casting director, and both of your parents had acted.
Yes, and my dad was a literary agent. Then he gave up his job then to chaperone me on the Potter set. Yeah. I mean, I always think my parents were the perfect amount of knowledgeable about the industry to help guide me through it without being jaded or cynical about the industry or opportunistic about the industry or anything like that. So I really lucked out with them. They were very, very, and they were also really good at keeping me, they were, I don't think, ever going to let me get too big for my boots.
Well, I mean, it helps when you got parents who know what the process is.
It helps a huge amount. I mean, they can, even if my dad hadn't, like, they hadn't spent a huge amount of time on film sets as actors, but they've been around them a lot in their in their later careers, and so they could definitely, you know, they knew what was expected of me. They knew what was expected to, you know, in terms of, and they could also, you know, they looked out for me and, you know, would check that they were very, you know, that I was getting my schooling every day or that I wasn't on set for more hours than, you know. Especially now having a kid, when I think about what they did in terms of like getting me through it and just handling everything in a way that, I often tell the story about one of the most intense things that happened to me as a kid was arriving at the airport in Tokyo when I was like, I think 13. I think there were like 5,000 people at the airport waiting to like greet me. And it was crazy. Like there were 100 guards like holding people back, and we were like racing through them all and to try and like get to the car. And we got to the car and my mum and dad just sort of started laughing about it and being like, whoa, wasn't that crazy? And I think a lot of the time as a kid, you just model off what your parents do. So rather than being freaked out or rather than thinking like, oh, you know, this is because I deserve it, which is honestly the most lethal thing you could think, you know, you just think, oh, this is crazy. Let's go to the hotel.
If you see something modeled, it becomes possible.
Yeah. And I think that's how a lot of my parents are both very, I don't know, they were always managed to be very, very calm in and about what was happening in our lives in a way that I'm sure they didn't really feel calm, but they kept it together for me.
I was watching the screen test you did for Potter. You were remarkably calm and good.
Thank you. I disagree, but thank you very much. I will say the one thing I've seen that screen test, and I do seem really calm. I do seem like I'm very easygoing and happy to be kind of, I'm not like freaked out by being on camera or being with the director. And I do think it probably helped that I did not know as much about, like I wasn't a kid that was fanatically into Harry Potter at that point. I had read the first two. And also Chris Columbus deserves a huge amount of credit. You know, he's really, you know, obviously famously good with young actors, and he was just great at making us all feel at ease and like we were having fun.
You weren't reading it. It looked like you had it memorized. But
I would hope so.
Yeah. But I mean, that was a very emotional scene that you were doing.
I guess. I mean, you know, it's a job. You want to be a 10-year-old actor, you're going to have to learn some lines. I would have learned them with my mum and dad. My mum and dad would have run them with me. You know, they were, and also they did. You know, my dad also did this with me when we were a kid. He would do like practice interviews and stuff with me.
Would he really?
Yeah, he did some, definitely. Yeah.
How did they go?
Good. He was just like, what are you going to say? Like, think about what people are going to ask you this, so like, have something thought about, so you can. And it didn't translate in the first couple of years. I've had it in my head that I was like always fairly okay at interviews, and then I went back and looked at some of my like early press tour stuff for the first part of them. I was like, oh no, I did not know what to say or how to be, but I was just a kid.
Yeah. No, well, that's why I thought, you know, looking at the screen testing, because at that point you'd done Copperfield, and that was it, right?
Copperfield, and I had a small part in a film called The Tailor of Panama.
That's right.
But that was it. So which is, you know, I hadn't done a huge amount, but I was the most out of. I think Tom had worked a lot more than me, and there were a couple of the other young cast. But Rupert and Emma had obviously done nothing before, so I had a little bit of experience, which was helpful.
The film roles that you've taken are often described as eclectic, and you've been all over the map. I mean, it's almost like you're trying to throw people off your trail.
Great. I mean, yeah. First of all, I think I get a tremendous amount of credit for doing something that most actors would like to do if they were in my position, which is that I can pick and choose and only do the things that I want to do. I do think if you can keep people guessing, that's a great thing. And I think there's something about having played one character for so long that I came out of those 10 years with a sense of like, oh, great, now I just want to do as many different things as possible. And that sense of excitement at the sort of range of possibilities of stuff that I want to be involved in hasn't really dwindled at all. As the time's gone on, I'm still like, yeah, I just want to do, especially now having done Merrily for a while, I want to like try some different stuff out after this.
Was How to Succeed your first musical?
Yes. Yeah, very much so.
Was that intimidating?
Yes. I think I didn't know quite how intimidating it was going to be when I signed on for it. I think my mum and dad had both grown up on musicals, and they both played musicals a lot in the cast. In my head, I'd sort of gone like, oh, I'd love to do a musical one day, but had never thought that hadn't thought it would happen for a while. I thought that would be sort of down the line.
Yeah.
I remember I said to Rob Ashford, I can carry a tune, but the dancing, I was like, get that out of your head. Like, that's not gonna happen. I am not going to be able to do that. I think we had about 18 months at that point till we were going into rehearsals, theoretically. So he said, we've got 18 months, why don't you just see what you can do in 18 months? And he set me up with an old friend of his called Spencer Solomon, who was my dance teacher and became a really good friend. We did choreography from Guys and Dolls that Rob had choreographed in London, the Ewan McGregor version. There was some stuff from Thoroughly Modern Millie. Spencer was throwing me stuff from Chicago, and just to get me learning the language of choreography. And I will say, doing the choreography that I've done in that show is still, if I ever look at that, I do go, I cannot believe I did that. Yeah. I'm still so proud of that. Like the final, Brotherhood Man in that show is one of the proudest things I've ever done.
I can't believe you were given like that long a runway to get ready. I mean,
yeah, I mean it's incredibly lucky. So when by the end of Potter, and this is one of the other things that I like about my life now, and sort of being able to have a bit of freedom. At the end of Potter, I could tell you what I was doing for the next 3 years. Like on a month-by-month basis.
I mean, you knew it was coming, but I imagine that transition must in some ways have been a little scary.
It was. I mean, yeah, just in the sense that I love doing what I do and was scared that I wouldn't get to do it as much as I want or do it forever.
Yeah. But also freeing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the double-edged sword of that moment. I remember feeling on the last day of Potter like I didn't know what I was going to do next or how I was going to cope, because it wasn't just the films, it was like all of the people and the building and the day-to-day life that was just the structure of our entire lives for 10 years. I did a film in the UK, The Woman in Black, and then I came over here and did How to Succeed, and then after How to Succeed I did my first film in America, which was Kill Your Darlings.
Oh, right.
The crew of Potter was so huge. There were so many thousands of people working on it every day that you're very unlikely to ever step onto another film in England without knowing somebody who knew me as a child. On The Woman in Black, I loved that film. I loved making it. But there were people on there who'd like seen me as a kid still. And so I think there was something really important about coming to New York and making a film here where actors, crew, everybody, nobody had known me since I was growing up. Nobody was, and I think that allowed me to like see myself as an adult more and start to sort of grow, I guess.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. Sometimes you have to recalibrate your own sense of self as well as other people's.
Right. And like find out who am I when I'm not surrounded by people I've known for 10 years, who am I in this, the world I want to be in, but not surrounded by everything that is totally familiar.
I mean, I guess when I said, some ways you were trying to throw people off, it's like you're trying to make people forget something in some ways.
I've always been slightly shy of sort of using those words. Just I want it to be able to coexist, and I don't feel like there's any reason why it can't. I love Potter, and I love those films, and I love what I wouldn't be where I am without them, and I wouldn't have found the thing that I love doing without them. Mm-hmm. So I'm always very happy to sort of like talk about them and to meet people who love them. I think at the time, in the few years immediately after, I was a little bit more like, can we talk about, can we just talk about the film plays, not Potter? I think it was probably a bit more of that. But now I think I'm so sort of like happy with where I am. I feel like you can do new things without disregarding the old.
That's a good place to be. You've mentioned being a dad a bunch. How are you finding being a father?
I love it and him so much. It's indescribable, really.
It must be a lot, though, to have a 1-year-old and be doing, as you are today, 2 shows.
Yeah, it is. 2 show days are particularly hard and sad because I leave in the morning and then he's asleep by the time I get back. And I do feel like I see him the next morning. I'm like, oh, you're a different human being. You have grown up so much in the last 24 hours. There's some things about the theatre schedule that are great. I'm around most of the day, which is really, really nice, most days of the week. Yeah. And then I just go off in the evenings when he is mostly asleep. But it's 6 days a week, and I'm just, I'm ready to just be with him for a while after this closes and just be a family with him and Erin.
You live part-time in New York, right?
Yeah.
What made you want to settle in New York?
I think it is tied into my experience of doing theatre here in a big way. At a time when the rest of the world was being like, you are always going to be Harry Potter, it was like Broadway kind of went like, let's see what else you can do.
You felt embraced.
Accepted and embraced, and very lucky to be here and then to be able to live there for a year. And then I met my girlfriend shortly after, How to Succeed, and she lives here. And so it was always something I was kind of gradually spending more and more time here. And now I have an American son, so I will very much be here.
Yeah. Do you think of yourself as a Broadway actor now? I mean, you've done 5
think
shows.
so yeah, I've done 5 shows. I think at a certain point I get to say that. Not to say that that's a complete finished article or anything. Like I'm always going to hopefully be getting better and not resting on any laurels. But yeah, I definitely feel a lot less of the kind of imposter syndrome that I felt when I was particularly in the rehearsal room for How to Succeed, where I was like, what am I doing a musical with these people who are all like singing and dancing in ways that I could never dream of. But you keep working and you catch up a bit.
What do you do when you're having that feeling?
I mean, I think you just go, well, I'm here now. So let's like try as hard as you can and work as hard as you can and throw yourself into it with the people around you. I remember when I was doing Equus, there was like a story that was written in an English newspaper that I always misremember the first line of it, but it was something along the lines of, crash, the sound you hear is the sound of a career coming to a grinding halt. And the tone of the thing was like, doing this play is a big mistake. And I remember looking around the room at Richard Griffiths and Thea Sharrock and John Napier and David Hersey, these incredible lighting and set designers and being like, well, and actors, obviously Richard, and just going like, well, if I'm screwing up, then I guess all of these people are too. And I find that pretty unlikely because all of these guys really seem to know what they're doing. A lot of it is about trusting in the people around you that you're all trying to make something great. Yeah,
but you haven't been afraid to sort of walk out on the edge.
I guess not. I mean, it's not, I'm not in a war zone. It's not, I don't like to say too much about actors' bravery. There's a certain vulnerability that you have to have or whatever and be willing to take a chance.
There has to be some kind of emotional bravery and even, isn't there?
I mean, I think so, yeah, absolutely. Because I think I just struggle with the term bravery being applied to something. It's such it's a great job. And it requires that you sometimes, there's a sense of, I remember James McAvoy, actually, I worked with him once, and he talked about, when you're crying on a film set and you're crying in front of a bunch of people that, absolutely don't care that you're crying, and there's something, you feel silly, there's something embarrassing about it, but part of your job as an actor is to just, be okay with being embarrassed and exposing that stuff. I think I have the most fun and I'm at my best when I'm a little bit scared that it's all going to go horribly wrong at any minute. Yeah. I mentioned to you before, Franklin Shepherd, my sort of the biggest song for me in the show in Merrily, for the first and touch wood only time, went really, really wrong the other night.
How did it go wrong?
I jumped a full 2 minutes of the song, and I just took my eye off the ball for a minute and was suddenly like, "Oh God, this is really a nightmare."
What did you do in that moment?
I stared at Jonathan Groff and I grabbed him so hard, like he was the only thing anchoring me to the planet.
What were you trying to say in that gesture?
Oh, nothing. It was. I think I genuinely felt like I might just disappear down a hole. But then, I mean. Sweat like I've never experienced before. Just I sit in the chair the whole number, I don't move. I was sweatier than I have been after full workouts.
Yeah, I'm sorry to make you relive that.
No worries, thank you very much. You see it was happening in my eyes. I spent the rest of the show just being like, what's the point? I was really, Jonathan and Lindsay were having to really keep me going.
I think you have to have one of those somewhere.
Yeah, it's happened to get it out of my system and I'm going to be very sharp for the rest of the run.
Yeah. What else do you aspire to in the theater?
I honestly, I don't know. Maybe some people are out there who have a sort of list of things that they would like to do or parts, but I really don't. I want to direct, but I want to do that on film, and I don't think I would know the first thing about directing on stage.
Right.
I think it's really different.
I know you're aware of it. I mean, in his diaries, Alan Rickman said he thought you'd be a great director.
I know, which is now I've got to prove him right.
But you want to.
I do want to, and I would love to direct on film, and I feel like I would know what I'm doing in that world more than I would know what I'm doing on directing stage. And I don't have, there's not like a list of parts. But I want and hope that I will be returning to stage, throughout my career until they kick me out.
You've written a screenplay, I think, right?
I have, yes, unproduced and nothing happening with it. But yes, I have written something, and I love writing, and I want that to be a part of what I do going forward.
You do a lot of writing?
I have not done a lot of writing for a while. I tend to go through periods of being like when I've got an idea for a script, then I can be quite prolific and quite fast. I'm not somebody who has the discipline to just write every day to keep in practice. I do not have that, unfortunately.
Very hard. Especially when you have a 1-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I've given myself a little bit of time where that's just gone out the window, and I'll get back to it at some point.
How do you feel about the possibility of winning a Tony?
I am thrilled that we're all nominated. Like, if you told me when I was coming out of Potter and not knowing what was going to happen next, that this would be happening one day, I don't think I would have dared to believe you. I'm more sort of ambivalent about my own winning. I will burn the building to the ground if Jonathan Groff doesn't win. But the best one, everyone else in the category is amazing. That is true, but I'm very biased here.